My name is Eli, and I'm 27 years old. I was born 8 years after my brother, Jacob, the golden boy, the family's pride, the one they planned, prayed for, and paraded around like a trophy. Me? I was the surprise. That's what they always called me, like I was an unexpected bill or an old box of junk they forgot was in the attic. Growing up, the word extra became part of my identity. Extra clothes? Mine were Jacob's hand-me-downs. Extra room in the car? I got the cramped middle seat. Extra ticket to the game? Sorry, Eli, we only had three. You understand. I did understand. Or, at least, I learned to pretend I did. My childhood was spent in the background, always a few steps behind my brother's spotlight. Jacob got the sports trophies, the framed school awards, the beaming pride in my dad's eyes. When he got into college, they threw him a backyard barbecue with banners and balloons. When I got in, on scholarship, no less, my mom said, "That's nice, sweetie. Let's not go into debt like we did for your brother." Still, I didn't make waves. I played the part they gave me. The quiet, helpful one. The afterthought. I learned to blend in, to be polite, to never complain. I took family photos during holidays, made excuses when no one remembered my birthday, and smiled through jokes that stung more than they realized. Or maybe they did realize, and just didn't care. But the engagement party? That was the moment everything shifted. Jacob had proposed to Natalie, his girlfriend of 3 years, a bright, chirpy woman with an Instagram-perfect smile and a knack for saying the wrong thing in the nicest tone. I'd met her a few times, and she always acted like I was a waiter at a wedding. She once asked me to top off the wine at our family Christmas dinner. I wasn't even sitting at her table. So when the invite came for Jacob and Natalie's engagement party, I wasn't surprised it had a typo in my name, or that it arrived 2 weeks late, or that I was listed as E. Williams +0. I didn't have the energy to be hurt anymore. It just felt expected, predictable. The party was at a rented event space downtown. All white walls, soft lighting, and floral arrangements that probably cost more than my monthly rent. I showed up early, camera in hand, because I'd been asked, or rather, assigned, to take the official photos. No, hey Eli, would you mind? No thank you. Just bring your camera. You're good at that, right? Like I was the help. Like I didn't have any reason to be there unless I was providing a service. When I arrived, I was met by my mom near the entrance. She didn't hug me. She didn't say hello. She waved her hand at the catering team behind me and said, "Can you go ask them to bring out more napkins? They listen better to family." Then she looked at me and laughed. Well, technically. Inside, I was introduced to Natalie's friends as the extra one. That was the exact phrase. "This is Eli, the extra one," Natalie giggled. "Jacob's little brother. You know, the surprise baby." My mom, standing right beside her, chimed in like it was her favorite joke. Well, he was never part of the plan, but here we are. My aunt, who I hadn't seen since my high school graduation, gave me a once-over and said, "At least you're finally useful. Someone's got to take the photos." I nodded, smiled, raised the camera, clicked the shutter. They posed for group photos on the balcony with the skyline behind them. Jacob gave a speech while I snapped away. My dad stood next to him, a proud hand on his shoulder, eyes misty. "This," he said, "this is what we always dreamed of." I was standing 10 feet away, taking pictures like a hired photographer at a stranger's wedding. As I moved through the crowd, documenting moments I wasn't part of, I caught snippets of conversation. "She's lucky to be marrying into such a great family. Oh, Jacob always had it together. Not like that other one. Eli? He's sweet. A little odd, though. Lives alone, doesn't he?" Every word chipped away at whatever armor I had left. I kept smiling, kept working, but my chest felt tight, like the room was slowly shrinking. It wasn't new, this feeling. It was just louder now, more vivid. After dinner, just before the cake was wheeled out, Natalie stood up and tapped her glass for attention. "We want to thank everyone for being here," she said, beaming. "It means the world to us, especially to our amazing families, to the people who raised us, guided us, and showed us what love looks like." My parents stood and clapped. My aunts dabbed their eyes. Jacob kissed her hand like a scene from a movie. "And a special thank you," she added, "to our family photographer/brother, Eli. You've got such a good eye, and such a quiet presence." Everyone laughed. I smiled again, just as I had rehearsed. Then I looked down at my phone. The draft email was already open, an old friend I'd been shaping for 6 years. It had attachments, screenshots, photos, audio clips, a careful, chronological trail that no one in this room knew I had. I'd started building it after Jacob's college girlfriend came to me in tears one night, saying Jacob had cheated on her with Natalie, her roommate. It wasn't just a one-time mistake. It was months of lies. He had gaslit them both, manipulated their friends, and even swiped money from their shared apartment fund to buy Natalie jewelry. I helped her pick up the pieces. She asked me if I'd tell the truth, but I was too scared back then. Too unsure. Too small. But I never deleted the evidence. Over the years, more cracks showed. Stories didn't add up, timelines shifted, money vanished. And every time I noticed something, I saved it. I documented it. I archived it. Quietly. Patiently. Like a historian cataloging a truth that no one wanted to hear. I never meant to use it. Not really. But there's only so many times you can be dismissed, humiliated, erased, before you stop asking for space and start taking it. I looked around the room. My mom was whispering to a guest, probably about me. My aunt was still laughing at something Jacob had said. And Jacob himself? He was leaning against the wall, one arm around Natalie, eyes scanning the room like he was already bored of it all. I raised my camera. Say cheese. Click. Then I hit send. And 5 minutes later, everything began to unravel. The thing about digital receipts is they never really go away. The photos I'd saved, the screenshots I'd captured, Jacob thought they had vanished with old phones, deleted messages, buried memories. But I'm not the kind of person who forgets what he's told not to remember. Especially not when it's clear the people around you will only respect you if you hold the receipts they fear most. The email went out to 3 people. Natalie, her older sister, who'd always been suspicious of Jacob, and her maid of honor, who was currently standing next to the cake, holding a glass of champagne and a very fake smile. I'd labeled the email for when you want the truth, no filters. It had a long trail of attachments and a short message. You don't know everything you think you know. You should, especially before you say yes to forever. I didn't linger to watch the explosion. I didn't need to. It started small, a vibration in Natalie's purse. I watched her reach in absent-mindedly and check her phone while still nodding to the guests. Then she froze. 1 second. 2. Her face dropped just slightly, the corners of her smile trembling like they'd forgotten how to hold shape. She scrolled and then, slowly, looked up at Jacob. She didn't say a word, just turned the phone so he could see. He laughed. At first. Then his face changed, too. He reached for her wrist, whispering something, trying to keep the panic out of his voice, but it was too late. Her sister had read the email. So had the maid of honor. I watched both of them turn toward Natalie like synchronized dancers breaking from script. The room had gotten quieter without anyone realizing it. You could feel the shift, that breathless pause just before a glass tips off a table. Something was wrong, and it was spreading. Natalie stepped away from Jacob without saying a word. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just moved, slowly, deliberately, like someone walking through a fog towards something they finally understood. I was already halfway to the exit. I didn't need to see the rest. But I paused, just before the door, because part of me still expected someone to call out my name. To stop me. To ask what I'd done, or why, or even just notice that I existed. They didn't. As I turned to leave, I caught a final glimpse of my mother across the room. She looked confused, maybe even slightly annoyed. She was scanning the room for someone, probably a caterer, maybe another aunt. Definitely not me. Because even as the engagement shattered and Natalie stormed away from Jacob in front of 60 guests, even as the murmurs turned to gasps and chairs scraped against the polished floor, I remained invisible. Not out of weakness this time, but by choice. I stepped into the elevator, the soft hum of descending levels surrounding me in something that felt like peace. By the time I reached the ground floor, my phone was buzzing, text from my sister, missed calls from an unknown number that I knew had to be Jacob. I turned it off, walked out into the night. The sky above me was dark, but the air was clear. I had no plan, no destination, just the sudden weightlessness of a truth finally set free. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the extra one. I felt like the author of the moment. But the fallout, that was only beginning. And I knew exactly how deep it would go. Because what I'd sent to Natalie, that was just part 1. And part 2, the part I'd saved for my parents, hadn't been sent yet. Not yet. But I had it ready, drafted, documented, labeled. All it would take was one more insult. I didn't go home that night. Home, if you could even call it that, was a tiny studio apartment on the edge of the city, the kind where you can touch the fridge and the bed at the same time. A space I'd filled with thrift store furniture, quiet plants, and a bookshelf nobody in my family ever asked about. They knew I was into writing, but none of them had read a word I'd published. Not the essays, not the short stories, not even the one that won an award and landed me a 2-minute radio interview. My mom said, "That's nice," and asked if I could print a copy to mail to her. She never brought it up again, so I didn't go there. I just walked, through streets pulsing with nightlife and neon, through laughter and open patios where strangers clinked glasses and kissed under street lamps. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel triumphant either. I felt still, like my whole life had been a pool of water held under tension, and someone finally dropped a stone in the middle. The ripples hadn't reached the edges yet, but they would. I checked into a small hotel on the waterfront. Paid cash. Used a fake name. Not because I thought I'd done something wrong. I hadn't. But because I knew my parents. And Jacob. And even Natalie, if she let her rage get the better of her. They wouldn't care about the truth. They'd care about how it looked. And they'd come looking for someone to blame. And they always knew where to find me. Well, they used to. I lay on the bed fully clothed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment Natalie saw the email. That flicker in her face when the truth touched her. I'd spent years wondering if it would ever be worth it to let it all out. The evidence, the whispers, the photos, the gut feelings I could never prove until I finally could. There had been a time I thought maybe the family would come together if I just waited long enough. Maybe if I stayed quiet, they'd miss me one day. Apologize. Reach out. But they never did. And that night, in that hotel room, I finally accepted it. They didn't want to see me. They wanted me not to exist at all. The next morning, I turned my phone back on. 43 missed calls. 26 voicemails. More than 100 text messages. The first dozen were from Jacob. Some angry, some panicked. One that just said, "How could you?" Then came Natalie. She hadn't responded right away, but at 3:42 a.m., she sent one message. I should have known. Thank you. I don't know what I'm going to do yet, but I'm done lying for him. And for myself. Then, a follow-up. I didn't know what they said about you until I read what you wrote. You didn't deserve that. I'm sorry. I stared at that message for a long time. Not because I needed an apology, not from her, but because it was the first time anyone had actually seen me. Not the extra one. Not the backup plan. Just Eli. But it didn't last long. By noon, my mother had left 5 voicemails. Her tone shifted in each one, scolding, pleading, dismissive, angry. I played the first 3. Eli, what did you do to your brother? He's devastated. You've always been jealous. And this is just cruelty. Call me back right now. I don't know what you thought you were doing, but we raised you better than this. Fine. If this is the life you want, don't come crawling back when no one's speaking to you. Click, click, click. Then came a call from my dad. I didn't answer. He left no voicemail. But an hour later, I got a text. You've embarrassed the entire family. I hope you're happy. I didn't reply, because I was happy. Not in the balloons and cake kind of way, but in the quiet, solid kind of way. The kind of happiness that grows out of truth, even when it's messy, even when it hurts. By sunset, I was sitting on the edge of the hotel's rooftop deck, watching the water ripple under an orange sky. I pulled out my laptop, connected to the hotel Wi-Fi, and opened the second draft. This one was longer. It wasn't just about Jacob. It was about them. About how my parents used my college savings to pay for Jacob's second car. About how they pressured me into co-signing a loan I never saw a dime of, and how Jacob never paid it back. About how they laughed when I got rejected from my dream job interview, because at least you tried. About how they made me sleep on the couch for 2 months when Jacob and Natalie needed space during their breakup, while I still paid half the rent. I had the paperwork, the emails, the screenshots, the receipts. I kept it all. Not because I wanted revenge, not at first, but because I needed proof that it wasn't all in my head, that I hadn't imagined the way they looked through me, the way they leaned on me when they needed something and ignored me the second I asked for anything in return. It was all here, in this document, labeled for when they pretend they don't remember. I didn't send it yet, not because I didn't want to, but because I wanted them to make the next move. And sure enough, they did. The next morning, someone knocked on my hotel door. I hadn't told anyone where I was, hadn't used my real name. But when I looked through the peephole, I froze. It was my father, standing there, holding a folder I recognized, one I never thought I'd see again. And behind him, someone else stepped into view. My mother. She looked furious, but not surprised. And that's when I realized. They knew. They always knew. And they were here not to apologize, but to stop me from finishing what I'd started. I didn't open the door. Not right away. I just stood there, one hand on the knob, heart hammering in my chest. The sight of them, my parents, on the other side of a door they'd never knocked on before in their lives was surreal. My mother's arms were crossed like she was waiting for a child to confess something. My father looked like he hadn't slept, but the folder in his hands? That chilled me, because I recognized it instantly. It was mine. A cheap black binder I kept at the back of my bedroom closet, filled with documents and printouts, loan agreements, tuition receipts, texts I'd printed out and highlighted. I hadn't touched it in over a year, assuming they'd never find it. I must have left it behind during a brief stay at the house last winter, when I came home for Grandma's funeral and slept in the basement because Natalie and Jacob were stressed and needed my room. My father knocked again, firmer. My mother spoke through the door, her voice cool and level, the way she used to talk to me when I came home from school with a scraped knee, and she was more annoyed than concerned. Eli, open the door. We need to talk. I didn't. But I did flick the lock, let the deadbolt thud open, and cracked it just enough for my face to be visible through the sliver. No more than a few inches. She gave a tight smile, like I'd just done the bare minimum, and she was proud of that. We just want to clear the air, she said. My dad didn't speak. He just held the binder out slightly. Is this what you've been using to twist things? He said. You've got it all wrong, Eli. None of this is what you think it is. I stared at the folder. For a brief moment, a childish instinct kicked in. The part of me that wanted to back down, apologize, tell them they were right, that I'd overreacted, that I was just sensitive. But that part of me had died at the engagement party. I opened the door a little wider, stepped aside, and let them in. They walked in like they owned the place. Even here, in a hotel room they hadn't paid for. My mom glanced around, wrinkled her nose at the folded blanket on the couch, the chipped coffee table. My dad sat down without asking, the binder on his lap like it was Exhibit A in a court case he didn't expect to lose. I stayed standing. My mother turned to me. Look, we know you've been carrying some things. Misunderstandings. We should have handled things differently, maybe, but going behind our backs and sabotaging your brother's engagement? That's not okay, Eli. I didn't answer. So she kept going. We're a family. Families don't tear each other apart like this. What you did, you embarrassed all of us. In front of Natalie's family. In front of friends. People are asking questions. Jacob hasn't left the house. My dad finally spoke, flipping open the binder. You think this stuff proves something? That we took advantage of you? You signed these loans. You offered to help. Did I? I said calmly. Or did you pressure me when I was 19 and terrified of losing your approval? He didn't answer. My mom scoffed. So what now? You're the victim? You poor, neglected little boy. I let that hang in the air. And then I walked over to the nightstand and picked up my laptop. It was already open. The email draft was still there, addressed to all the extended family members they respected, the ones they always tried to impress at Christmas, the ones who'd funded Jacob's early internships and invited him to golf retreats and investment dinners. A curated list of people they couldn't afford to lose face with. What is that? My mother asked. I didn't respond. I just turned the laptop toward them and clicked preview. They watched as the screen filled with bullet points, documents, screenshots, timelines. Every lie, every manipulation, every secret. You didn't just ignore me, I said. You used me. You made me feel like I was lucky to be allowed in the room. You made me sleep in basements and pay your debts, and then laughed about it in front of people. You called me an accident for most of my life. But the thing that hurt them most. They looked up. You never even asked how I was doing. Not once. My dad shook his head, incredulous. Eli, come on. You're being dramatic. No, I said. I'm being honest. They were quiet then. I sat down across from them. Calm. Measured. You didn't come here to apologize, I said. You came here to stop the bleeding. You're scared. Not of what you did, but of people knowing. My mother's lips parted like she was about to deny it, but she stopped. Because she knew I was right. I pointed to the screen. This email goes out in 12 hours unless I say otherwise. I've scheduled it. You're blackmailing us? My father asked, eyes narrowing. No, I said. I'm giving you a choice. They stared at me. You can walk out of this room, pretend I'm dead, and deal with what happens when the world finds out what kind of people you are. Or you can fix it. My mom crossed her arms. Fix what exactly? Start with Jacob paying back the loan, I said. All of it. You too. Then, a public apology. At the next family gathering, you stand up, you look me in the eye, and you say everything you've never said. My father scoffed. You think we're going to grovel? No, I said. I think you're going to decide whether your reputation is worth more than your pride. We sat there in silence. Finally, my mom stood up. Her eyes had changed, still sharp, still bitter, but underneath it all, something else. Fear, regret, maybe even shame. We'll talk to Jacob, she said. I nodded. You do that. My father stood too. He looked at the binder again, then at me. You've been keeping score a long time, he muttered. No, I said. I've been surviving. They left without another word. The door closed. The hallway went silent. And I sat there, staring at the screen. I didn't know what they'd do. If they'd cave. If they'd lash out. If they'd smear me before I could hit send. But for once, I wasn't afraid of the outcome. Because I'd finally done it. I stood up. I claimed my voice. I stopped waiting to be loved and started demanding respect. A week later, at my cousin's birthday dinner, my mom stood up in front of 20 relatives, lifted her glass, and cleared her throat. Her voice wavered at first, then steadied. We owe someone here an apology. A real one. Eli, we haven't treated you the way you deserve. We made mistakes. We forgot how to listen. And I hope it's not too late to change that. Every fork paused midair. Every head turned toward me. And for the first time in my life, I was seen, not as the extra one, not as a footnote, but as someone who mattered. And in the end, that was worth everything. Every photo, every email, every second I waited to be heard. Because now they had to listen.